Love can blind you to the cracks in a perfect life. When trust shatters, the pain is raw and relentless. This is Tom's story, a man whose world crumbled when he uncovered his wife's devastating secret. My name's Tom. I'm 38, and I live in a quiet suburb just outside Denver, Colorado. I'm a project manager at a mid-sized construction firm, the kind of guy who likes routines, coffee at 7 a.m., gym after work, and weekends grilling in the backyard. For 10 years, I thought I had it all figured out. My wife, Sarah, and I met in college, back when I was a lanky engineering major and she was this radiant art history student who could talk about Monet for hours. We got married at 28, settled down, and built a life together. No kids, but we had our golden retriever, Max, and a cozy three-bedroom house with a mortgage we were chipping away at. I wasn't rich, but I was proud of what we had. Sarah worked part-time at a local gallery, and I handled the bills. We were a team, or so I thought. It was late summer last year when everything started to unravel. I'd been working late on a big project, a new office complex downtown, and I was exhausted but happy. Sarah had been her usual self, or maybe a little quieter, but I chalked it up to her being stressed about a gallery exhibition. We still laughed over dinner, watched old movies on the couch, and planned a fall trip to the mountains. Life felt good, stable, but there's this thing about stability, it's fragile, like a house of cards, waiting for one wrong move. It was a Thursday night, one of those warm evenings where the air smells like cut grass. I got home late, around 9 p.m., and Sarah was already upstairs, saying she had a headache. I was rummaging through her bag for the car keys. We shared a spare set. When my fingers brushed against something odd, a phone, not her usual iPhone with the cracked case, but a cheap, black flip phone, the kind you'd buy at a gas station, my stomach twisted. Why would she need a second phone? I stood there, frozen, in our dimly lit kitchen, Max snoring on his bed in the corner. I flipped it open, and there it was, a string of texts from a contact labeled J. Messages like, "Miss you already," and "Can't wait for tomorrow." My heart pounded so hard I thought I'd pass out. I didn't confront her right away. Part of me wanted to believe it was a mistake, maybe a work thing, or a friend's phone she was holding. But deep down, I knew. I sat on the couch, staring at that phone until 2 a.m., rereading every word. The next morning, I couldn't look at her. She was sipping coffee, humming, acting like everything was fine. I felt like I was drowning. Finally, I couldn't hold it in. "Sarah," I said, my voice shaking, holding up the phone. "What the hell is this?" Her face went pale. She didn't deny it, didn't make excuses. "Tom, I'm so sorry," she whispered, tears welling up. "I didn't mean for you to find out like this." She admitted it. An affair with a guy she met through the gallery. His name was James, some artist. She said she'd been unhappy, felt trapped, needed space. Space? We'd built a life together, and now she needed space? I felt like the ground was collapsing under me. I didn't yell. I just walked out to the garage, sat in my truck, and cried for the first time since my dad died 10 years ago. Looking back, it's hard to pinpoint when things started to shift, because for years, life with Sarah felt like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. We had this rhythm, you know? Mornings started with me brewing coffee while she fed Max, our golden retriever, who'd wag his tail like he was conducting an orchestra. I'd head to the construction firm, managing timelines and crews, while Sarah would drive to the gallery, her eyes lighting up when she talked about a new artist or exhibit. We weren't perfect. Money was tight sometimes, and we'd bicker about dumb stuff like whose turn it was to do dishes. But it felt like we were building something solid. Our early years were magic. After college, we moved to Denver because Sarah loved the mountains, and I found a decent job. We rented a tiny apartment with creaky floors and a leaky faucet, but we made it ours with secondhand furniture and her colorful paintings on the walls. I'd come home to find her sketching, her hair in a messy bun, humming some indie song. We'd cook dinner together. Well, I'd chop vegetables, and she'd do the actual cooking, because my skills stopped at scrambled eggs. Those nights, laughing over a bottle of cheap wine, felt like they'd last forever. When we got married, it was a small ceremony in a mountain lodge, just family and a few friends. Sarah looked like she stepped out of a painting herself, in a simple white dress with wildflowers in her hair. I remember my brother giving a tipsy speech about how I'd never shut up about her in college. We danced to some sappy John Mayer song, and I thought, this is it. This is my life. We bought our house a couple of years later, a fixer-upper we poured our savings into. I spent weekends patching drywall, while Sarah picked out paint colors, always something bold like mustard yellow or teal. It's art, she'd say, grinning, when I raised an eyebrow. Work kept me busy, but I loved providing for us. My job at the firm was demanding, long hours, endless emails, but it paid well enough to cover the mortgage and let Sarah work part-time at the gallery. She loved her job, curating exhibits and chatting with artists. I'd go to her openings, feeling out of place in my button-down among all the artsy types, but proud to see her in her element. We'd talk about starting a family someday, but we were happy with just us and Max for now. I thought we were on the same page. Money was our biggest stress. The house stretched us thin, and Sarah's job didn't bring in much. I'd take on extra projects to cover bills, which meant late nights and tired mornings. Sarah never complained, but I could tell it wore on her when I was gone a lot. Still, we made time for each other. Friday movie nights, hiking trails with Max, or just sitting on the porch with beers, watching the sunset. I'd tell her about my day. The guys on the crew, the chaos of missed deadlines, she'd share. Stories about quirky gallery visitors or some artist's meltdown. We'd laugh, plan our next adventure, like that fall trip to the Rockies we were so excited about. I wasn't perfect. I could get wrapped up in work, maybe miss a dinner or two, but I loved her fiercely. I'd leave notes on the fridge, stupid stuff like, "You're my favorite human," and she'd stick them in a drawer, saying she'd keep them forever. I believed we were happy, that our life was enough. Maybe I was too comfortable, too blind to see the cracks forming. Looking back, I wonder if Sarah was already drifting. If those quiet moments we shared were hiding something I couldn't see. But back then, in those years before the phone, before Jay, I thought we were unbreakable. I thought we were forever. It's funny how you can miss things right in front of you when you're so sure of someone. Looking back, the signs were there, subtle at first, like whispers I didn't want to hear. Sarah started changing, but I was too busy or too trusting to connect the dots. It wasn't one big moment. It was a slow drip of little things that, in hindsight, screamed trouble. About a year before I found that phone, Sarah started staying late at the gallery. She'd always loved her job, but suddenly she was needed for extra hours. Inventory, she said, or helping with new exhibits. I didn't question it. I was proud of her passion, but those late nights became more frequent, and she'd come home distracted, scrolling her phone instead of talking to me. I'd ask about her day, and she'd give vague answers, like, "Oh, just the usual chaos," with a smile that didn't reach. Her eyes, I figured she was stressed, maybe burned out. I'd offer to take her out, ease the load, but she'd brush it off, saying she just needed a quiet night. Then there were the mood swings. Sarah had always been steady, but she started snapping over small things, like if I left dishes in the sink or forgot to walk Max. One night, I came home with takeout, hoping to surprise her, and she barely looked up from her sketchbook. "I'm not hungry," she said, her voice flat. I felt like I was walking on eggshells. When I asked if something was wrong, she'd say, "I'm fine, Tom, just tired." And I'd drop it. I didn't want to push her away. She started dressing differently, too. Sarah had always been artsy, flowy skirts, funky earrings, but she began wearing sharper outfits, like tight dresses and new perfume that smelled expensive. I complimented her, thinking she was just feeling confident, but she'd shrug, almost embarrassed. Once, I saw a receipt on the counter for a $200 perfume. We weren't broke, but that was a lot for us. When I asked about it, she laughed it off, saying it was a gift from a gallery coworker for the exhibition. She said, I believed her, why wouldn't I? The biggest red flag was her phone. She'd always left it lying around, but now it was glued to her hand, or she'd tuck it under her pillow when she slept. If I walked by while she was texting, she'd tilt the screen away, just enough to notice. One night, I jokingly said, "What? You got a secret admirer or something?" She froze, then laughed too loud, saying, "Yeah, right, Tom." My gut twisted, but I pushed it down. I didn't want to be that guy, the paranoid husband checking her phone. I trusted her, or maybe I was scared of what I'd find. She also started talking about this artist, James, from the gallery. At first, it was casual. His work was innovative, she said. Or he had a big show coming up, but his name kept popping up. James said this, or James thinks that. I met him once at an opening, a tall guy with a smug grin and paint-splattered jeans. He shook my hand too hard, like he was sizing me up. Sarah laughed at his jokes a little too long that night. I told myself it was nothing, just her being friendly, but I started noticing how she'd light up when she mentioned him, in a way she hadn't with me in months. I kept making excuses. Work was crazy for me, too. Deadlines, budget overruns. So maybe I wasn't giving her enough attention. I tried harder, planning date nights, leaving notes like I used to, but she'd cancel plans last minute, saying she had a work thing. I'd sit alone on the couch, Max's head in my lap, wondering why I felt so distant from the woman I loved. I thought it was just a rough patch. Marriage has those, right? I had no idea she was already slipping away, weaving a web of lies I was too blind to see. After finding that phone, my world didn't just crack. It shattered. Sarah's confession hit like a freight train. She sat across from me at our kitchen table, tears streaming, saying she'd been seeing James for 6 months. 6 months. Half a year of lies while I was planning our future. She said it just happened, that she felt lost in our marriage. I wanted to scream, but I just sat there, numb, as she talked about needing space to find herself. I kept thinking, who are you? This wasn't my Sarah. The days after were a blur. I moved to the guest room. Couldn't stomach sleeping next to her. Every morning, I'd wake up hoping it was a nightmare. But then I'd see that flip phone in my mind, those texts from Jay. I couldn't eat. Food tasted like ash. At work, I'd stare at blueprints, my mind replaying her words. My crew noticed. My foreman, Mike, pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. I lied, said it was just stress, but I was falling apart. Sarah didn't move out, and neither did I. We were stuck in this weird limbo, sharing the house but not our lives. She'd try to talk, saying things like, I still love you, Tom. But it felt like a script. I'd catch her texting, probably him, and she'd quickly put her phone down, like I was the intruder. One night, I asked, are you still seeing him? She hesitated, then said, no, it's over. But her eyes darted away, and I knew she was lying. That cut deeper than the first betrayal. I started obsessing over details. I'd check her gallery schedule, wondering if she was really there or with him. I drove by the gallery once, saw her car, and felt like an idiot for spying. But the doubt was eating me alive. I'd lie awake, imagining her with James, laughing like she used to with me. My confidence tanked. Was I not enough? Too boring? Too focused on work? I'd look in the mirror and hate the guy staring back, a 38-year-old fool who didn't see it coming. The worst was the silence. Sarah stopped trying to explain, and I stopped asking. We'd pass each other like ghosts. Max was the only one who seemed normal, nudging my hand for pets. But even he'd look at me with those big eyes, like he knew something was wrong. I started drinking more, whiskey after work, just to numb the ache. One night, I got so drunk I called my brother, sobbing, telling him everything. He wanted me to leave, but I couldn't. Not yet. This was my home, my life. Sarah's behavior got bolder. She'd come home late, smelling of that damn perfume, and act like nothing happened. Once, I found a gallery brochure in her bag with a note scribbled on it. You're my muse, Jay. I confronted her, my voice shaking. You said it was over. She sighed, like I was exhausting her, and said, Tom, you're making this harder than it needs to be. That was it. No apology, no guilt. I felt like I was losing my mind. Was I the bad guy for wanting answers? The emotional toll was brutal. I dropped 10 pounds, couldn't sleep, and my work suffered. My boss called me in, said I was missing deadlines. I didn't care. Friends stopped inviting me out. They didn't know what to say. I felt alone, like I was drowning in my own house. Every memory, our hikes, our movie nights, felt tainted. I kept asking myself how I missed it, how I let her slip away. The pain wasn't just heartbreak. It was shame, anger, and this crushing sense that I'd failed at the one thing I thought I'd gotten right. Rock bottom isn't a moment. It's a place you live in for a while. For me, It was the months after Sarah's confession, when the pain stopped being sharp and just became this heavy, endless fog. I was still in the guest room, sleeping on a lumpy mattress that creaked every time I moved. The house felt like a museum of our old life, pictures of us smiling on the walls, her paintings everywhere, mocking me. I stopped cooking, lived on takeout and coffee. Max was my only anchor, his head on my knee, while I stared at the ceiling, wondering how it all went so wrong. Work was a disaster. I missed a major deadline on the office complex project, and my boss put me on a performance plan. Get it together, Tom, he said, not unkindly, but I couldn't. I'd sit in meetings, nodding, while my mind was stuck on Sarah's voice saying, I need space. I started calling in sick, something I'd never done. My crew stopped joking with me. They just gave me pitying looks. I hated it. I hated myself. The drinking got worse. I'd polish off a bottle of whiskey over a weekend, sitting in the garage with the radio on low, Max at my feet. One night, I got so wasted I texted Sarah, who was in the next room, why wasn't I enough? She didn't reply. The next morning, I found her crying in the kitchen, but when I tried to talk, she just said, I can't do this, Tom, and left for the gallery. I felt like a ghost in my own life. The lowest point came on our 10th anniversary. I'd forgotten it. But Sarah hadn't. She left a card on the counter, one of those generic ones with flowers, and a note. I'm sorry we're here. I still care about you. I stared at it, rage and grief mixing like a storm. I tore it up, grabbed a bottle, and drove to a park. I sat in my truck, drinking, crying, yelling at nobody. A cop knocked on my window, asked if I was okay. I lied, said I was just tired. He let me go, but I knew I was spiraling. I didn't recognize myself anymore. I stopped talking to friends. My brother called, but I let it go to voicemail. I couldn't face the questions, the pity. Social media was torture. Sarah was still posting, all smiles at gallery events, like our marriage wasn't collapsing. I saw a photo of her with James, his arm around her, captioned, Art Vibes. I threw my phone across the room, cracked the screen. That's when I hit a new low. I started Googling James, found his art page, his smug bio, his upcoming shows. I wanted to hate him, but I just felt pathetic, like I was the one who didn't belong. Physically, I was a wreck. I hadn't been to the gym in months, my clothes hung loose, and my face looked gone in the mirror. I'd wake up with headaches, my heart racing from anxiety or too much booze. Max started acting out, chewing furniture. Like he could sense the chaos, I'd yell at him, then feel awful and hug him, promising I'd do better, but I didn't know how. I kept thinking about Sarah's words. I felt trapped. Was I the trap? Had I suffocated her without realizing? The guilt was crushing, even though I knew, deep down, her choices weren't my fault. One night, I found an old photo album, us at the lodge, her in that white dress, me grinning like an idiot. I sat on the floor, sobbing, Max licking my face. I didn't want to lose her, but I didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't know who I was. That was rock bottom, realizing I'd lost my marriage, my confidence, my sense of self, and I had no idea how to climb out. Something shifted the morning after I found that photo album. I woke up on the floor, Max curled up next to me, the empty whiskey bottle by my side. My head throbbed. But for the first time in months, I felt a spark of clarity. I couldn't keep living like this, drowning in pain, letting Sarah's betrayal define me. I looked at Max, his trusting eyes, and thought, he doesn't deserve this mess. Neither did I. That was the moment I realized I had to fight for myself, not for her. I started small. I poured the rest of the whiskey down the sink, hands shaking. It wasn't easy. Cravings hit hard, but I replaced late-night drinks with walks with Max. The fresh air cleared my head, gave me space to think. I started noticing things again. The way the mountains looked at dusk, the sound of kids playing down the street. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I wasn't ready to forgive Sarah, but I was tired of letting her choices destroy me. I called my brother, Mike, and told him everything. Something I'd avoided for months. He didn't judge, just listened, then said, Tom, you're stronger than this. Come stay with me for a bit. I didn't take him up on it, but that call reminded me I wasn't alone. I reached out to an old friend, Dave, who'd been through a divorce. Over beers, he told me about his therapist, a guy who helped him get his head straight. I'd never done therapy, thought it was for other people, but I was desperate. I booked a session. The first session was awkward. The therapist, Dr. Ellis, was this calm guy with a gray beard who didn't push me to spill everything. I rambled about Sarah, the phone, James, my anger. He just nodded, then asked, "What do you want for you, Tom?" I didn't have an answer. For years, my life had been about us, Sarah and me. I realized I'd lost myself in that. Dr. Ellis suggested I focus on one thing I could control. I chose work. I started showing up on time, focusing on projects. My boss noticed, eased up on the pressure. It felt good to be competent again. Sarah and I were still in the house, but I set boundaries. I told her I didn't want to talk about us unless she was ready to be honest. She nodded, quiet, but kept coming home late. I stopped checking her schedule, stopped caring if she was with James. It wasn't easy. I'd still get flashes of anger, but I was done begging for answers. One night, she tried to talk, saying, "I miss how we used to be." I looked at her and said, "So do I, but you broke that." It was the first time I felt like I had some power back. I started rediscovering myself. I joined a local hiking group, something I'd always loved but stopped doing. The first hike was tough. My lungs burned, and I felt out of place. But the group was welcoming, and the views reminded me there was a world beyond my pain. I started journaling, too. At Dr. Ellis's suggestion, I wrote about the good times with Sarah, but also about who I wanted to be. I wasn't that lanky college kid anymore, but I could be someone new, someone who didn't need her to feel whole. The shift wasn't instant. Some days, I'd see her laugh on the phone, and it'd gut me, but I was learning to let go, to see her betrayal as her failure, not mine. I wasn't fixed, but I was moving. For the first time, I felt like I could breathe without the weight of her lies crushing me. I didn't know what was next, but I knew I couldn't stay in that dark place anymore. The fog started lifting, not all at once, but enough to see a path forward. Therapy with Dr. Ellis became my anchor. He helped me unpack the guilt I'd been carrying. The idea that I'd somehow pushed Sarah into James's arms. "Her choices aren't your fault," he said, and I started to believe it. I wasn't perfect. I'd been too focused on work, maybe missed her signals, but I loved her honestly. That was enough. I started rebuilding, piece by piece, not for her, but for me. Work became my proving ground. I threw myself into the office complex project, staying late to double-check plans, earning back my boss's trust. My crew started joking with me again, and I felt like part of the team. One day, Mike, my foreman, clapped me on the shoulder and said, "Good to have you back, man." It wasn't just about work. It was about feeling capable, like I could control something in my life again. I moved out of the guest room and into a small apartment nearby. It was a tough call. Leaving the house felt like admitting defeat, but staying was killing me. I took Max, a few boxes of clothes, and some old records. The apartment was bare. Just a couch and a bed, but it was mine. I hung up a photo of me and Max hiking, not one with Sarah. For the first time in months, I slept through the night without waking up in a panic. I leaned into new habits. The hiking group became a weekly thing, strangers who became friends, sharing stories over sweaty trails. One guy, Chris, invited me to a barbecue, and I went, nervous but curious. I laughed that night, really laughed. For the first time in forever, I started running again, too, not just to stay fit, but because it made me feel alive. My body got stronger, and so did my mind. I wasn't that broken guy in the garage anymore. Sarah and I had to talk eventually about the house, the divorce. I hired a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman who laid out my options. Sarah didn't fight me on much. We met at a coffee shop to discuss splitting assets. She looked tired, her spark gone. "I never wanted to hurt you, Tom," she said. I believed her, but it didn't change anything. I told her I was filing for divorce, and she just nodded. It was civil, but it stung. I didn't hate her anymore, but I didn't want her in my life. Therapy helped me see the bigger picture. Dr. Ellis asked me to write down what I wanted in 5 years. I wrote about a new career path, maybe starting my own contracting business, traveling, finding someone who valued me. It felt ambitious, but possible. I started taking online courses in business management, something I'd always wanted to do but put off. Each lesson felt like a brick in a new foundation. I also reconnected with people. My brother flew out, and we spent a weekend fishing, talking about everything but Sarah. Friends from the hiking group invited me to game nights, and I started saying yes. One night, at a local bar, I met Laura, a nurse with a warm smile and a quick wit. We talked for hours about nothing and everything: movies, dogs, the best taco joints. I didn't jump into anything, but that conversation reminded me I could connect again, that I wasn't broken. Regaining power wasn't about revenge or proving Sarah wrong. It was about choosing myself. I'd spent years building a life for us, but now I was building one for me. I started saving money, planning a solo trip to the Grand Canyon. I'd always wanted to go, but Sarah wasn't into it. Now, it was my adventure. I looked in the mirror and saw someone stronger, not the old Tom, but a new one, ready to live again. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday in March, almost a year after I found that phone. Sarah and I met at the courthouse, signed the papers, and walked away from 10 years of marriage. It was strangely peaceful. No yelling, no tears. We sold the house, split the proceeds, and I kept Max. She moved to a condo downtown, closer to the gallery. I heard through a mutual friend she was still seeing James, but it didn't gut me anymore. I wished her well, in my head, and minute, I was done carrying the pain. I settled into my new life. The apartment felt like home now, with plants I didn't kill and a shelf of books I actually read. Work was steady. I got a promotion, leading bigger projects, and my business management courses were paying off. I was pitching ideas to start my own firm, something I'd never dared before. Max was happier, too, wagging his tail on our hikes, like he knew we'd made it through the storm. Laura, the nurse from the bar, became a bigger part of my life. We started dating, taking it slow. She'd been through her own heartbreak, so we understood each other. Our first real date was a hike. She teased me when I tripped over a root, and I laughed so hard I forgot to be nervous. She wasn't Sarah, and I didn't want her to be. Laura was kind, grounded, and made me feel seen. We'd cook dinner together, her showing off her pasta skills while I played sous chef. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Therapy didn't stop. Dr. Ellis helped me process the divorce, not just as an end, but as a beginning. I realized I'd been defining myself through Sarah, her happiness, her dreams. Now, I was learning who Tom was. I took that solo trip to the Grand Canyon, stood at the edge, and felt small but alive. The vastness of it reminded me the world was bigger than my pain. I journaled there, writing about gratitude, not for the betrayal, but for the strength it forced me to find. Looking back, the takeaway isn't about Sarah or James or even the affair. It's about resilience. I thought love was enough to hold a marriage together, but it takes two people choosing each other every day. Sarah stopped choosing me, and that broke me. But it also woke me up. I learned I could rebuild, not just to survive, but to thrive. I wasn't the same guy who cried in his truck that night. I was better, scarred, sure, but stronger. I don't hate Sarah. She was lost, too, in her own way. Maybe she's happier now, maybe not. I hope she finds what she's looking for, but it's not my job to care anymore. My job is to live for me, for Max, for the people who show up for me now. Life isn't perfect. There are still bad days, moments when old wounds ache, but I've got plans, a business, a trip to Alaska, maybe a future with Laura. I'm not defined by what I lost anymore. I'm defined by what I'm building. If I could tell anyone going through this, it's this. Betrayal feels like the end, but it's not. It's a brutal, messy start. You don't have to have it all figured out. Just take one step. For me, it was pouring out the whiskey, calling my brother, booking that therapy session. Those steps led me here, to a life I'm proud of. You'll find your steps, too. You're stronger than you know.